Whereas Fairfax County Public Schools complies with the federally mandated requirements that we educate all children, regardless of immigration status. Whereas the school board is committed to maintaining a safe, inclusive, and welcoming learning environment for all children in our public school system. And Fairfax County Public Schools values the richly diverse backgrounds of our students and families. Whereas Fairfax County's diversity makes our community strong and vibrant, and we are proud of what every resident has to offer. Therefore, be it resolved that the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors does hereby affirm our strong commitment to maintaining a community culture that values and celebrates the similarities as well as the differences among our neighbors. I move that the Fairfax County School Board formally support and endorse the Fairfax County Statement on Diversity and Inclusion approved by the Board of Supervisors on April 4th, 2017, which affirms Fairfax County's strong commitment to maintaining a community culture that values and celebrates the similarities as well as the differences among our neighbors, and affirms a commitment to safe, inclusive, and welcoming learning environment for all children in our public schools.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Ms. Huff?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have a motion that we would make this new business tonight to vote on as an action item at our next regular business meeting.
Second. So is your motion to postpone until a date certain, which
nope,
is the
it's not a motion to postpone. It's a motion to follow our normal process of putting this on as new business to then vote on as an action item at our next regular business meeting.
Okay, I will recognize that as a motion to postpone action on this until the next regular business meeting. And Madam Clerk, that date, to be specific, is... I'm sorry, April
22nd.
April 22nd. There is a motion to postpone date, vote on this resolution until the next regular business meeting on April 22nd. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Evans. Oh, Schultz, sorry. All right, Ms. Huff, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. So I appreciate this coming to us, and I think it's important for us to understand our governance and our process and how we normally operate. When we want to bring something to the board and to the public, we go to a forum topic, which happens prior to our regular business meeting. From there, we as a board come to a consensus as to whether we'd like it to become an agenda item or go to a work session or go to one of our subcommittees. In this case today, we had a forum topic on it, and it was already put on our agenda as a placeholder before we had the actual wording of what we'd be voting on. And here we are ready to vote on it. And I think that in respect to our public, that the appropriate thing is to just follow our normal process. I think if we place it on as new business tonight, as we would normally do, it signals to the community that we are following up on what the Board of Supervisors are doing, but we're doing it within our own process. And I'd like to point out, when we did one Fairfax resolution, we put it on as new business on May 26th, and then we voted on it as an action item on July 28th. That is our normal process. That was 2 months, not asking for 2 months, just asking for the normal process. We are elected officials here, voted in to represent and to be a voice for those in our community. If we're throwing things on the agenda and voting on them right away, I don't know how I do that well. And just to be clear, we have people signed up as citizen participants to speak on this after we vote on it. So I just don't see how that is good governance and that's good process. This was voted on unanimously by the Board of Supervisors. They went through their process and they got it done, and they did it with unity among their board. I'm asking this board to follow our normal process like we always do, so that we can go into this with unity and express the importance not only of this, but of process and of good governance. And so I would ask for support on this.
Ms. Schultz, would you like to speak to your second?
I would, and I appreciate the eloquence with which Ms. Huff addressed this. You know, Mr. Moon read from a letter from somebody who's a DC resident who I'm not exactly sure how they got a copy of the resolution that we're voting on tonight, because it wasn't on our board docs on an agenda for this meeting 24 hours ago. And frankly, if that individual were here, they wouldn't be allowed to speak, because you have to have a special dispensation if you're not a Fairfax County resident to speak. So we've had one person weigh in before we vote, and the public hasn't even been made aware that we're voting. We voted to put this on tonight's agenda, even though there was already a placeholder roughly 35 minutes ago. That's not good governance. That doesn't represent the public well. That doesn't give us an opportunity to engage the public. It doesn't give the public a chance to address us. And it's difficult to look into an audience and say to you, well, you get to speak, but we're going to do whatever we're going to do first, and then you'll speak later. So that's backward governance. I found it peculiar that this made its way onto our regular business agenda, but not even it's not even on our action item. It's on the opening of the meeting. And so we haven't even advertised this as action by the board. And if it were anything else, there would be, frankly, an outcry of how this happened. It's only because the Board of Supervisors acted on it this week. But the Board of Supervisors acted on it after many weeks of multiple iterations of a resolution that was started by one of their board members, was passed around, they had opportunity to comment, they had opportunity to refine, they had opportunity to follow their process. The Board of Supervisors process isn't our process, and them following it and navigating a resolution by and amongst themselves does not represent this board. So we are in a position where if we act tonight without putting this onto new business and giving the 2 weeks, we are acting outside of our governance. We've said that rules don't matter, that you can throw governance to the wind and go outside the governance structure and not have to follow anything that the board does. Once this board starts playing Wild Wild West and not following any governance structure, and you all can hold all the signs up that you want, it doesn't mean that we don't want to vote on it. We just want to vote on it within accordance with the policies and processes that this board has established for itself. And that's how we govern such a large school division and how we handle the annual workload of the school board. That's how we respectfully govern. It's how we respectfully work with each other, as the Board of Supervisors did. But that same level of respect has not been demonstrated by forcing this onto the agenda outside of our regular business processes. And so I respectfully ask that we adhere to our governance structure, that we put it onto new business, and that in 2 weeks hence we vote on it in accordance with the way we typically do the board work.
Ms. Hines?
Thank you. Ordinarily, I am a big believer in process. I think you protect the process, you can trust the product, right? That's the idea. And we are all about process here. But I also think sometimes you can adhere so closely and be such a stickler for process that you kind of, it flies in the face of common sense. And I think it also, in this case, risks having us look like we are divided and not supportive of something that our Board of Supervisors has done unanimously in support of the diversity in our schools. I think the statement that the Board of Supervisors made is, kind of mom and apple pie. This is who we are. This is what we do. I don't see the need to wait. It would actually be 3 weeks that we'd have to wait to support a statement. We're not even drafting anything. All we're doing is supporting a statement that the Board of Supervisors has already made. And so I think now and then it's the right thing to do. The timeliness of something matters. I have heard from parents, I have heard from teachers, I have heard from administrators, I have heard from social workers. There is fear in the community. There's fear among our students. This is an important statement. It's a simple statement. I appreciate our board chair laying this out for us in the forum this evening. We've had like a 48-hour turnaround from when the Board of Supervisors finished their work and adopted this, but our board chair wisely gave us time in our forum tonight to be prepared to talk about this. And to me, it's just to get caught up in process over something like this sends the wrong message to our community. So I won't be supporting the substitute.
Thank you. I have Mr. Wilson, Ms. McLaughlin, and Ms. Evans. And again, right now we are speaking on the motion to defer action until the next board meeting. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually support the motion made by Ms. Huff. As many of you know, from the forum that I had questions that were raised. There were, in particular, there's one statement in the Board of Supervisors made a couple of statements about Fairfax County Schools, and one of them is that the FCPS complies with federal requirements regarding immigration. So the questions that I had could be answered if we had a break of a couple of weeks to find out sort of what the answers are for the community. Those questions are, I won't go into detail with them, but questions include sort of how is FCPS complying with federal mandated requirements operationally? Is there any tension between what FCPS is doing versus the governing state and federal law? Are we at odds at all with any neighboring jurisdictions in terms of our policies and procedures? And what does the Virginia Department of Education say about policies regarding immigrants? I think all of these questions are worthy questions and worth our discussion as a board before we vote, and so I would support the delay.
Ms. McLaughlin and then Ms. Evans. And this is again on the motion to delay.
So I do very much appreciate the motion before us to delay. And as someone who joined this board because I believed so much in community engagement and accountability and transparency, I understand where some of my colleagues are coming from and trying to just look at when we are going to vote on something as a board, that we really do work together as a board to develop consensus, and that we do have an opportunity to make sure everybody understands what's in front of us. So I'm conflicted on this one. I think where I see it slightly different from the motion to delay is that we are not changing policy. We are not taking an action to change the way we operate in our schools. So when it comes to community engagement and informing me as a board member on how I can best represent Braddock District and how can I best represent and be a good steward of Fairfax County Public Schools, I ask myself, well, does my vote impact that, and do I therefore need to know where my district is on something? In this case, I believe that Chairman Evans has brought us something that's simply saying our Board of Supervisors have made a declaration on diversity and inclusion. And as someone who is a social worker, and I'll speak to this later on, I think it is very important that we look at what do we message and signal as public officials. And so if I thought that we delayed this by 2 weeks, it might change something, then I would understand the need for postponement. If I thought, again, that we were going to actually take action where I have been unfair to Braddock residents because they didn't get a chance to inform me about how they felt about this, but I do believe that Braddock District residents did vote me in for my inclusive perspective in how we serve our community. So tonight's vote, I do think the voters are going to look to me and want to understand, where is Megan McLaughlin on this? Does she support what our Board of Supervisors have to say about diversity and inclusion? And it is because of that that I think it's really important that as colleagues, we not get caught up necessarily on, are we circumventing a process? I think we absolutely have a process when we are talking about taking action. This is simply saying, where do we support something that the supervisors have done? At one point, there was before the board that we might have our own statement. And that absolutely, I would have put my hand in the air to say to postpone, because that, when this board is speaking and the language that comes out of this board, we do need to work together on that. But for me to affirm what the supervisors have done, I don't need 2 weeks, and I don't believe the Braddock residents want me to necessarily take 2 weeks. I've got to focus on other things, but they need to know where I stand on these types of issues. And so I apologize if I wasn't a little more eloquent, but I did want everyone on this board to understand where I am, which is we do follow Robert's Rules of Order. There are times when things develop right before board meeting, and I have always supported colleagues that if they wanted to bring something to the table that wasn't vetted, it was last minute, it happens. And this tonight, you know, I always believe in lessons learned, and we can learn and do better, but I don't believe a postponement is going to change what the outcome is.
Thank you. I will call on Ms. Evans.
So I want to thank Ms. McLaughlin for her comments. I think that was very well said, Ms. McLaughlin. I did just want to address the process question, because we have, in fact, followed our process. I circulated this initially to board members on Monday, March 27th. I alerted board members that I would be putting a placeholder on the April 6th agenda, and that we would be discussing it at our forum. Our forum was an opportunity for board members to decide whether we would consider this tonight, whether we would delay it, whether we would do something else, and that is in fact consistent with our process. I also followed up with another email to board members on March 31st, elaborating a bit on that. And then as soon as the Board of Supervisors had completed its action, I made sure that board members had that in hand as well, and knew that it had passed unanimously. So I do believe we have followed process. We do have the ability as part of our forum to put something on the agenda, and this, I believe, is something where we, as believing in One Fairfax, we are supporting what the Board of Supervisors has passed unanimously, and our board believes that this is appropriate for us to consider tonight. So I
Ms.
will be.
Corbett, thank you. Ms. Corbett Sanders?
Sure. I too believe in process, and I think that you will often hear me say we need to go back to the process. We need to adhere to the process. This is actually somewhat of a unique situation, and it's a unique situation for a couple of reasons. One, this is not new policy. There's nothing in the statement that the Board of Supervisors has, and I'd like a confirmation of this. I don't know, either from Dr. Lockhart or I guess Dr. Lockhart. The two statements that we have here regarding Fairfax County Public Schools are: Fairfax County Public Schools complies with the federally mandated requirements that we educate all children regardless of immigration status. Whereas the school board is committed to maintaining a safe, inclusive, and welcoming learning environment for all children in our public school system, and Fairfax County Public Schools values the richly diverse backgrounds of our students and families. Is there anything new? Is there any new policy there?
No, there's not.
That's what I thought. So this is really an affirmation of policy that this school board has adopted over the past. We are not being asked whether or not we can modify the Board of Supervisors' statement. What we're being asked is whether or not we agree with the statement. And so it's not really a new policy or a new debate. Would I have liked to have had 2 weeks? Yeah, that would have been great, but the Board of Supervisors didn't give us 2 weeks. They adopted this on Tuesday, and it's now come to us on Thursday. We had an opportunity to adopt new policy tonight or to entertain new policy, and this board unanimously said, no, we don't want to go down that path. And so we've really restricted it to a yes or no vote as to whether or not the two statements about Fairfax County Public Schools are accurate reflections of of Fairfax County school policy. And so thank you, Dr. Lockard. I do appreciate that you clarified that that is existing policy.
I have Ms. Palchak and then Ms. Schultz.
Thank you. Just speaking to this motion, my thoughts are that we have already waited too long for this. There have been incidents at least 2 of our school sites where false rumors have been spread because of regular, routine police activity or people in uniform being on school property who are unknown. And that causes panic. It could also cause very unintended consequences, which is what mayors around the country have said. We want to ensure that we continue to be able to do our duty to ensure that all of our students are safe, our families are safe, and here in Fairfax, want to make sure that all of our students feel free and safe to come to school. I will speak more on the motion itself later that we're passing, but I fully support doing this now. I know we wanted to wait to do this in cohesion as one Fairfax with the Board of Supervisors. So for that, I do thank the chairman. I know we've had discussions in the past, and I appreciate that you had us wait in order to do this together. I know it's not easy. We are working very hard this year to try to do more together as the 2 boards, and so I fully support. As Ms. Corbett-Sanders said, this is not new policy. If someone wants to bring up new policy, would like to write our own resolution, I would support doing that through our regular process because that would be our own resolution. But as this is in support of what they are doing, and just as when the General Assembly is in session, things happen quickly. This was not as quick, but it was quite speedy on their end, and I want to make sure that we are supporting them and that our families and community know where we stand.
Ms. Schultz?
So what I just heard from Dr. Lockard is that it's just affirming what we're already doing. I've heard that we're not changing any policy and we're not introducing any policy and that we're not taking any action. Then I'm not sure what we're doing. Because if we're not taking any action, but the community is in fear, then we should take action. We should do something that's affirmative. I mean, if the community is in fear and there's something wrong by the lack of action, if there's something that we need to be doing, then we should be addressing new policy and we should be considering action to abate that fear. But the words aren't abating any fear because we've just said that the words are doing nothing. We're going to take no action. It doesn't change any policy, and there's nothing that's going to outcrop from this. So then it just becomes words. I also find it curious that there is a large audience here for and clearly in support of this motion when it wasn't on our. No, I'll let them have they have every right to clap. I have nothing wrong with that. That's their First Amendment right. I'm happy for that. But if this wasn't on our board agenda 24 hours ago, I don't understand how there's been a spontaneous, eruption, because the very motion that Chair Evans was talking about that had been previously passed around is not what's before us tonight, and we're not entertaining it. It isn't a new action of the board. We're just responding, and we're only responding to something that was placed on our public agenda 24 hours ago. I'm not even sure how that comports with our 3-day advertising requirement under the open meetings law. Just because we put a placeholder that said we are going to talk about something doesn't mean that we actually advertised what we were going to talk about. So we're right back to, if we want to fully engage and represent our community, then let's do it. But let's do it meaningfully. Let's not do it in a hollow fashion where we give 35 minutes notice about what we're actually going to be voting on because we're over in a side room that a lot of people don't really necessarily know what the forum's even about. If this is something that we want to entertain, and there's also a problem in the community, let's be good stewards of this system. And if there's something that we can do to help assuage any concerns in the community, let's do it. But don't try to force onto an agenda out of the regular cycle of the business, out of a lack of advertising to the community what we're even discussing, something that we're pre-admitting we're going to vote on before the public even gets to vote, talk to us about it tonight, and that we say doesn't do actually anything.
Thank you. I will call for the vote on the motion on the table. I'm sorry. Okay. All right, I'm sorry. I can't see Mrs. Huff.
That's okay. I just am uncomfortable with the fact that we're making this about a conversation of we have to do it now. The fact of the matter is, when we intend to do something, we make it new business. We let the public know we intend to do it, and we do it for a set amount of time, and then we do it. So I'm not asking for a delay, and I think it's inappropriate to couch it that way. I am asking for us to post it and to then act on it, because that's what we're doing. It's what we did with One Fairfax. That was a resolution. It was not new policy. The Board of Supervisors passed it first, and then it came to us. And we did it together, but not simultaneously. And so I'm uncomfortable with the fact that it's being couched as, if you don't do it tonight, you don't care about it. I've received questions as well, and I've been in great communication with Dr. Lockhart and his communications to the individual schools and principals. It is not as if we've been passive on this. We have acted, and now as a board, we are considering bringing our voice to what has already been operationalized by Dr. Lockhart. I have no problem with that, but I don't think it's acceptable to say now and then it's the right thing to do to not follow our normal process. Because one of these days, that now and again is going to hurt maybe someone in this room here supporting this tonight. So if we get to choose now and then we then become not representative, and I don't want to become that. I was elected to represent, and part of what I am representing is good governance and process. So I think it'll be very unfortunate if we can't do this around the right process and have then do it unanimously like the Board of Supervisors. So I am asking my colleagues to respect that, and I hope that we can get a vote on that. Thank you.
Ms. McLaughlin, and then Mr. Moon.
I just wanted to provide a little clarity and maybe a different mindset from what Ms. Schultz was saying. You're correct, Ms. Schultz, in terms of, is this about action? I don't think this is about we're going to do any new action. I think what we are trying to do is clarify and communicate to our communities that as they have shared that there is fear out there, the supervisors developed this diversity and inclusion statement, and we're simply affirming as individual board members that will take a collective board vote, do we affirm this statement of diversity and inclusion? Honestly, if we had before us the Fairfax County School Board statement of diversity and inclusion, then the 12 of us should absolutely have the opportunity to look at this language and make sure it speaks as a board. But this is what the Board of Supervisors decide to say. We've each individually had a chance to read it. If individual board members don't like the language in it or have concerns about it individually, I fully respect that they should have the right to vote in support of it or not. But as someone who does believe in Robert's rules where there are things where we're going to have to come speak to, and we're about to vote on a budget in less than 2 months, and I don't want to shut down any single board member who's going to bring a budget amendment that might be within a few days of the budget vote, and that would be just as much about process as what the motion is here. So I very much appreciate the good place that Ms. Huff is coming from. I know Ms. Huff is a deeply caring individual, as are all 12 of us up here. So I don't want anyone in the audience to think that how people are voting on this motion has anything to do about their character. It does have to do sometimes with people's comfort level and how we, process action before the board. And I do hate to disappoint any one of my colleagues on this, but I think this is the right thing to be voting on tonight.
I want to call the question. I want to call the question.
There is a motion to call the question. Is there a second? It's not debatable. All those in favor of calling the question? Okay, that's Hines, Palchek, Corbett Sanders, Strauss, Evans, Moon, McLaughlin, Darren Kofax, McElveen. Those opposed to calling the question? Huff, Schultz, and Wilson. The question is called. Therefore, we will return to the vote on whether or not to postpone the vote on this approval of this resolution to move this to action on the next meeting in April, which is April 27th. All those in favor of moving this to action to April 27th? It's Huff, Schultz, Wilson. Those opposed? It's Hines, Palchek, Corbett Sanders, Strauss, Evans, Moon, McLaughlin, Darren Kofax, McElveen. Therefore, that motion fails, and we are back to the main motion.
We had last time, but couldn't get it to work, so we're showing it tonight. Our first speaker is Josh Israel, to be followed by Jennifer Damasic, to be followed by Mary Mathewson. Mr. Israel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. My name is Josh Israel. I am here to speak tonight in support of the Diversity in Safe Schools resolution that you all just passed. I am thinking a lot about diversity lately. I recently learned that a high school friend of mine, the son of the principal of a Christian academy, converted to Judaism. This surprised me a little, but shouldn't have. I should be used to the unexpected by now. In recent years, one close Jewish friend of mine became a devout Episcopalian, while another became a Muslim. There remain the same people with whom I did some really bad theatrical productions, debated both at debate tournaments and over pizza, and stayed up late with watching cartoons, though each is now a bit grayer. I also recently learned that a friend and mentor I assumed straight married his same-sex partner of more than a decade. I was delighted for him and for another friend, a brilliant colleague whose family brought her to America as a small child, and who was able to work for our nonprofit thanks to President Obama's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. She just married her longtime boyfriend and has just begun the long process of becoming a U.S. citizen. What these people have in common is that while something about each of them is very different than when I first met them, what has not changed is that they are fundamentally amazing people. For me, the biggest change in my life came a couple months ago when I became a father for the first time. I look at our 2-month-old and I wonder what will come. This adorable baby's sexual orientation, gender identity, possible disabilities, religion, and future will be revealed to us in good time. I have made clear that loyalty to the Red Sox and Washington Nationals is non-negotiable, but I realize that even that is probably outside of my control. It is vital for us to celebrate and protect all of the diverse identities that make up our community, not just because that diversity strengthens and enriches us all, but also because we might someday be surprised to learn which of our kids may need those protections. Regardless of who my child proves to be, it will be a loved kid. And knowing that mine is just one of thousands of other newborns who will be FCPS students in the blink of an eye, I am deeply grateful to know that they will all be welcomed and protected by this school board's actions and its dedication to diversity in safe schools. I commend your commitment to inclusion and thank you for passing this resolution tonight.
Thank you.